Have you ever wondered where hell truly lies? Is it a blazing abyss deep beneath the earth as painted in the Bible? Or just a story your parents told to scare you away from mischief? What if God stood before you, his light radiant like a nuclear reactor core, and said that hell isn't a place you go after death, but something humans build right here on this earth? How would you react? I asked him that very question, in a moment I never anticipated, when my heart stopped beating on the cold floor of a laboratory, and his answer changed everything I'd ever believed. I'm James Edward Carter, a 52-year-old physicist from Boston, Massachusetts, and this is my long story. From a world of lifeless numbers and political debates to God's revelation about hell, peace, and the mission he entrusted me with in a world rushing headlong into darkness. I was born on June 12, 1973, in a two-story red brick house in Roxbury, a rough neighborhood of Boston, where narrow streets rang with the horns of delivery trucks each morning, and the smell of freshly baked bread wafted in from O'Rourke's bakery 3 blocks away. Roxbury in the 1970s wasn't a peaceful place. Gunshots occasionally echoed from street gangs, walls were marred with graffiti, and kids like me played pickup basketball on cracked concrete courts behind our homes. My father, Thomas Carter, worked at the Bethlehem Steel Mill near Boston Harbor, a towering man standing 6'1", with curly black hair and rough scarred hands from welding steel under rainy skies, his voice a deep rumble like a freight train when he told stories of World War II. My grandfather, Edward Carter, had driven a Sherman tank during the Normandy invasion in 1944, and Dad grew up steeped in tales of artillery smoke, whizzing bullets, and the bravery of young soldiers. Every evening he'd sit in our worn armchair in the living room, a Camel cigarette glowing red between his fingers, recounting, "James, war is hell, but sometimes it's the only way to keep peace." I'd sit cross-legged on the floor, hugging my knees, listening without fully understanding, just watching his eyes drift into a distant haze, as if peering through the smoke of time. My mother, Evelyn Carter, was a secretary at Roxbury Crossing Elementary, a petite woman barely 5'2", with long brown hair tied neatly back, her warm brown eyes always carrying a spark of faith. She worked all day managing stacks of paperwork, but at night, she'd don a green-striped floral apron, standing in our cramped kitchen making mashed potato cakes or New England clam chowder, the scent of butter and seafood filling the house. She was the keeper of faith in our family. Each evening, she'd sit at the kitchen table under the soft yellow glow of an old oil lamp, reading the Bible in a whisper that felt like a lullaby. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." Psalm 23. Dad wasn't a religious man. He'd grumble about sermons dragging on. But he respected her, and they faithfully took me to First Baptist Church on Warren Street every Sunday. The church was a white-painted wooden building with a sloped roof, its interior lined with polished pews, the air tinged with the smell of pine and old hymnal pages. I'd sit beside Mom, wearing a blue shirt she'd ironed smooth, listening to Pastor Johnson, a tall black man with a voice like thunder, preach about God's love, forgiveness, and hope in a sinful world. After services, Mom would hold my hand as we stepped into Boston's sunlight, saying, "James, God has a plan for you, even if you don't see it yet. Just trust him." I'd nod, smile to make her happy, but inside I didn't think much of it. God, to me back then, was a distant notion from her stories, unconnected to my basketball games or the math homework I despised. I grew up amid the turbulent 1980s. The Cold War stretched tight like a wire, TV screens flashing, Reagan branding the Soviet Union an evil empire, and Dad whispering to Mom in the kitchen, "If nuclear war breaks out, Boston's a prime target, too close to the coast." I was 10, watching news of the MX missile test in Nevada, white smoke streaking across the sky, and asked Dad, "Why do people make bombs to kill each other?" He sighed, ruffled my hair. "Because of greed, James. Greed for power, for land. But don't worry, God will sort it out." I wasn't sure if he believed that or just said it to ease my mind, but that question clung to me. Why do humans choose war over peace? In 1991, I started at MIT to study physics, bringing an old suitcase of clothes and $800 my parents had scrimped to give me. Roxbury to Cambridge was just a 15-minute bus ride, but it felt like crossing into another world, from dusty streets to a lush campus of glass buildings and chalkboards scribbled with equations. I fell in love with physics because it explained the world through numbers. No emotions, no vagueness. I graduated with honors in 1996, then joined MIT's Lincoln Laboratory in Lexington, a 20-minute drive from Boston. My job was researching nuclear energy, not weapons but clean reactors. Though I knew full well this technology had birthed the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. I lived in a small apartment on Concord Avenue, Lexington, a 3-story, gray brick building, my 3rd-floor unit with large windows facing maples that flared red each fall, furnished simply with an oak table Mom left me, a brown leather chair worn at the edges, and shelves sagging under books from Einstein's Relativity to Hawking's A Brief History of Time. I stand 5'10", lean from skipping exercise, my brown hair graying at the temples since age 40. Green eyes often bloodshot from late nights on screens or endless data tables. I stuck to routines, brewing black coffee with an espresso each morning, sitting at my kitchen table reading the Boston Globe, news of elections, Ukraine, climate change, listening to NPR's calm voices dissect U.S. politics on my tabletop, radio, then driving my 2015 Toyota Prius, slate blue, to the lab. There I worked amid the hum of machinery, the blue glow of screens, and the faint smell of burnt metal lingering from experiments. I never married, not because I didn't want to, but because work consumed me. I dated a few. Ellen, a Boston Globe reporter, dumped me in 2005 saying, "You live like a machine." Sarah, a teacher, left in 2010 after I canceled too. Many dates for data runs. I live alone, no kids, no ties to my parents since Dad passed from heart failure in 2010, and Mom from a stroke in 2015, leaving me solitary in a quiet apartment with only the Lexington wind and questions. What can, science explain about war, peace, or even my own soul? I followed politics, not for party loyalty, but for its impact on science. In 2016, I voted for Hillary, not a fan, but I feared Trump's budget cuts to research. In 2020, I backed Biden for his clean energy promises, though I doubted he'd follow through. I read about Ukraine, NATO, Putin, Crimea, wondering if World War III broke out. Would my science foster peace or craft more weapons? Mom's faith had faded in me. I stopped going to church, stopped praying, left her brown leather Bible, its edges worn, gathering dust in my bedside drawer. If God existed, I figured he'd lost interest in a guy like me, obsessed with neutrons and protons. March 2025 brought bitter cold to Lexington, hovering around 2 degrees C, melting snow leaving muddy puddles along Concord Avenue. I started feeling off, dull chest pain like a gentle squeeze, short breaths each morning as I tied my shoes, hands trembling when I held my coffee mug. I blamed stress. The new reactor project had the Department of Energy breathing down my neck, pushing me to 14 16-hour days, sleeping less than 4 hours a night on the lab sofa, surviving on vending machine sandwiches. I popped aspirin, wore thicker sweaters, tried to ignore it, never suspecting a stroke would drag me to the brink of death, facing God and the greatest question of my life. I woke at 5:30 a.m. on March 12, 2025, in my silent apartment, my head throbbing as if needles pierced my temples, my chest heavy like an unseen slab of lead pressed against it. I shuffled out of bed, a single frame with white sheets Mom bought from Walmart in 2008, pulled back the gray Sears curtains from 2000, peering out. Light snow fell on Concord Avenue, wind swirling past bare maples, a white mist cloaking the brick houses across the street. I dressed in a long-sleeve white shirt, tan khakis, and a thick gray sweater I'd knitted back at MIT, a hobby Mom taught me to unwind from classes. I trudged to the kitchen, flicked on the Nespresso, poured, in Starbucks grounds, but my hands shook, spilling hot water across the black granite counter. I wiped it hastily with paper towels, took a sip of black coffee, but my chest twinged. Not sharp, just a steady squeeze, lingering like a warning I refused to heed. I chalked it up to exhaustion. Last week, I'd stayed up until 3 a.m. 3 nights in a row, running reactor simulations on the Cray supercomputer, my eyes burning from staring at green screens and dancing numbers. I rummaged through the white plastic med box on the kitchen shelf, Mom's old stash of aspirin and ibuprofen, grabbed 2 325 mg aspirin, swallowed them with cold tap water that made me shiver, muttering to myself, "Get through work today, rest tomorrow, I can't crash now." I pulled on a dark green parka and a gray knit cap, stepped outside. The cold sliced through my skin. I huffed into my hands to warm them, climbed into my Prius parked out front. The engine hummed to life. I cranked the windshield heat, tuned. To NPR, Russia-Ukraine tensions escalate after the Donetsk attack. NATO holds emergency talks in Brussels. I drove to Lincoln Laboratory, 10 minutes down Bedford Road. Snow slicked the pavement. I crept along, eyes straining through the fog, my chest still twinging, but I brushed it off, convinced sitting at my desk would settle me. I arrived at 6:20 a.m., parked behind the cold gray concrete building past security. Mike, a 50-year-old guard, nodded his usual greeting. I swiped my ID, rode the elevator to the 3rd floor, entered Lab 304, a 50-square-meter space with sterile white walls, a glossy gray tiled floor, packed with equipment, a small reactor model in the corner, the Cray supercomputer dominating, half a wall, large screens flashing red and green neutron graphs, and the air tinged with the faint smell of burnt metal from prior tests. I hung my parka on a hook, sat at my desk, a cold metal slab by a window overlooking a snow-dusted field, booted my computer, and opened yesterday's reactor test data file. I worked alone. Colleagues typically trickled in after 8, but I craved the early morning quiet to focus. I typed data, neutron efficiency, reactor temperature, radiation levels, but by 7:30 my chest pain sharpened, a tight squeeze then release, paired with a faint wave of nausea. I paused, took a deep breath, but the room's chilly air didn't help, only quickened my gasps. I thought, need more coffee, stood to grab a cup from the machine in the corner, but my legs wobbled and I gripped the desk to steady myself. Rachel Kim, my colleague, 35, with black hair tied in a high bun wearing a white lab coat, walked in at 7:50, saw me, and asked, "James, you okay? You look exhausted." I forced a grin. Just need some caffeine. But as I turned back, to my desk, the pain erupted, a sharp stab like a knife shooting down my left arm, my head spinning, my vision blurring. I clutched my chest, panting, sweat pouring down my forehead despite the 18 degrees room. Rachel yelled, "James, what's wrong? You're pale as a ghost," I rasped, my voice weak as a whisper. "Call 911, heart." She bolted to the wall phone by the door, dialed, her voice trembling. "Emergency now! He's having chest pain, can't breathe, Lincoln Laboratory, room 304, hurry!" I slid off my chair, collapsing onto the cold concrete floor, clutching my chest, my knees curling up from the agony. The chill seeped through my sweater. I heard Rachel scream, "James, hold on, they're coming!" Footsteps clattered. Mike the guard, Tom the tech who'd just arrived. Someone muttered, "Looks like a stroke. See his face." I lay there, my vision fading, the white ceiling and LED lights dimming, the chest pain crushing me with every beat. Paramedics arrived in 8 minutes, sirens cutting through the snow, 2 figures rushing in. David, a burly man with short stubble and a deep voice, and Maria, a petite woman with glasses, clutching a medical bag. David knelt beside me, clipped, a heart monitor to my finger, a cold pinch, while Maria checked my blood pressure, barking, "Pulse 130, BP dropping fast, stroke, move now." David met my eyes, calm. "Hang in there, buddy. We've got you." They hoisted me onto a stretcher, straps tightening over my shoulders and legs, carried me down the hall, the wheels clacking on tiles echoing in my skull, out to the ambulance parked curbside, its red lights flashing through the thick snow. On the way to Mount Auburn Hospital in Cambridge, 15 minutes from Lexington, I heard the machines beep frantically, my pulse flashing on the screen. 135, then 145. Maria jabbed an IV into my right arm, the needle stinging, making me groan faintly. David slipped an oxygen mask over my face, cold air flooding my nose but doing nothing for the pain. My chest felt like an iron fist was tearing my heart apart, each beat a knife, my consciousness slipping, my eyes drooping. I whispered, my voice lost in the siren. God, if you're real, save me. Then darkness swallowed me. No sound of falling snow, no David calling, no lights, just absolute silence, as if I'd plunged into a bottomless pit. I came to, not on the stretcher or in the ambulance. I stood in an endless white space, no walls, no floor, just a cold white light, like the nuclear simulation chambers I'd worked in, but softer, warmer, like a reactor winding down after a test. I looked down, no sweaty gray sweater, no snow damp, khakis, just a simple white robe reaching my ankles, light as silk, so smooth I felt almost bare. I touched my chest. No pain, no heaviness, just a lightness, as if I'd shed a burden I'd carried my whole life without noticing. I walked, barefoot, on an invisible surface, not cold, not hot, just a strange softness like stepping on clouds from childhood dreams. I turned, scanning around. The white stretched on forever. No shadows, no sound, just my heart beating steady and slow, a peaceful rhythm I hadn't felt in years. Then a voice rang out, deep, powerful, like radio waves cutting through still air, yet clear as Dad calling me from the steel mill yard in Roxbury. James Edward, it said, not loud but piercing, as if rising from my very bones. I jolted, spun around, my pulse racing, and he was there. Not a white-bearded figure or a winged angel from First Baptist's stained glass, but a radiant golden light, like the uranium core I'd studied through goggles, yet not burning, not dangerous, just glowing with a warmth both gentle and majestic. I knew instantly it was God. No explanation needed, no proof required. I felt him in every breath, every heartbeat, every tear that spilled unbidden, rolling down my cheeks, dotting my robe with tiny wet spots. I sank to my knees, the white space cool beneath me, my hands trembling as I covered my face, choking out, Lord, am I dead? Where am I? I don't deserve this. I'm a scientist, I don't pray, I don't believe like Mom did, he answered, his voice like Lexington's winter wind but inexplicably warm. No, James, you're not dead. You're chosen. I called you through this threshold to see the truth, and to carry it to a humanity lost in the darkness they've forged themselves. I looked up, tears blurring my sight, straining to see into that golden glow, and asked, truth? I only trust data, equations. I don't understand miracles. Why me? A man who skipped church, who ignored Mom's psalms. He said, you trust data because I placed you there. Signs woven through your life, from your earliest days, have led you here. But first, what do you wish to ask me? My mind spun. I, a physicist, stood before God. No chalkboards, no computers, just the biggest question I'd wrestled with while reading news of war, politics, and humanity's destruction. I took a deep breath, blurted out, is hell real, Lord? If it is, where? I've studied nuclear energy. I know humans can unleash devastation like atomic bombs. But what is hell? A place you send the wicked, or a tale to keep us in line? The golden light flared like a reactor hitting its peak, and he replied, hell always exists, James, but it's not a place I crafted to punish. It's what humans build with their own hands, forged in greed, envy, and the destruction they choose over my peace. The white space faded, and I saw, not a dry list, but vivid scenes, more real than any documentary I'd watched on PBS or the History Channel, more painful than any sermon I'd heard. I saw World War I, Flanders Fields in Belgium, 1917, soaked in mud. British soldiers clutching Lee Enfield rifles, gas masks over panicked eyes, phosphorus artillery smoke choking the sky, explosions shaking the ground, bodies sprawled across, barbed wire, hands still gripping bayonets as if clinging to life. I smelled the mud mixed with blood, though I stood only in light. Then World War II, black smoke roiling over Hiroshima, Japan on the morning of August 6, 1945, after Little Boy detonated, 6,000 degrees Celsius heat turning homes to ash, people fleeing with blistered skin, children crying for their mothers amid the rubble. Auschwitz, Poland, 1943. Thousands of skeletal Jews shuffling into Zyklon B gas chambers, their eyes void of hope. Vietnam, 1968. The Thai Nguyen jungles ablaze with napalm, UH-1 Huey helicopters roaring overhead, American and Viet Cong soldiers trading fire amid smoke and fallen comrades. I saw Dachau, Germany, 1944. Nazi soldiers pushing corpse-laden carts. Through iron gates marked Arbeit macht frei, work sets you free. The stench of death thick though I wasn't physically there, just standing in the golden light, my hands trembling. Then a new vision, a future, closer than I'd imagined. World War III, no specific year, but thick smoke like black clouds, intercontinental ballistic missiles streaking from Russia over the Arctic, slamming into cities, Boston burning, the John Hancock Tower shattered, people fleeing down I-95, cars aflame, U.S. troops and an unnamed enemy clashing amid ruins, children sobbing in makeshift concrete bunkers. I saw the South China Sea, Chinese and American warships squared off, Tomahawk missiles bursting midair, oil staining the water red, Africa, civil wars spreading, villagers fleeing chemical bombs, toxic smoke killing livestock. I shouted, my voice breaking in the white void. Stop. Why this? What is it? He answered deep and clear. This is hell, James. Not flames beneath the earth, but fires humans kindle on its surface. Greed for power, envy of others' lands, hatred born of pride. These are the bricks of hell. I don't will it. They choose it. I crumpled to my knees, tears streaming, sobbing loudly. Why do you let it happen? If you're God, why not stop them? His voice rolled like waves crashing on a Massachusetts shore. I don't let it. I gave them freedom, James. Freedom to love or destroy. They've chosen destruction, from Flanders to Hiroshima, from Auschwitz to Vietnam, and now they're building a new hell. World War III isn't far if greed and envy prevail. But you, James, are chosen to bring light, to show them peace is possible through Psalm 23. I will fear no evil, for you are with me. The signs in your life prove you're mine. I wiped my eyes with my sleeve, looked up and asked, signs? I'm just a physicist living with machines and numbers. I've seen nothing special in my life. He said, you've seen, but you haven't understood. Look back, moments I placed in your life were not random. The white space glowed brighter, and my life unfolded, not as a list but as memories flowing like a river, each a thread he'd woven. I saw myself at 12, in Roxbury's backyard, digging in the dirt with a matchbox truck Mom bought at a flea market when I heard, James. Though Mom was washing dishes in the kitchen, Dad welding steel 5 miles away at the mill, the voice was light, clear, like wind rustling through the oak out back. I ran inside, asked Mom, did you call me? She smiled, hands soapy. No, you must have imagined it. Maybe the neighbors calling their dog. But I knew it wasn't. Nobody. Nearby had a James. He said, that was me calling you, James, the first sign, so you'd hear me amid the ordinary. The scene shifted. I was 19, lying on my MIT dorm bed, rain tapping steadily on the fogged glass window. I dreamed I stood inside a nuclear reactor, golden light blazing like a uranium core, but I wasn't afraid, though I knew its power could kill me in an instant. I reached out, touched the glow, felt a strange peace despite the machinery roaring around me. I woke, scribbled in my notebook. Semester stress, weird dream. But now, he said, I sent that dream, not stress but my power within you, so you'd trust even what you couldn't measure. Then I saw myself at 35, at a physics conference in Washington, D.C. in 2008, amid the financial crisis. Scientists argued over nuclear weapons. One side claimed they preserved peace, the other warned they invited war. But I sat silent, not joining in, yearning to use science to avoid conflict instead. I left the session early, walked along the Potomac, watching water flow under Key Bridge, asking myself, why don't I debate like them? Why do I only want peace? I thought it was shyness, but he said, You don't belong to their battles. You belong to me, to bring peace amid. Va. Another memory. I was 28, in Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital in Boston, 2001, sitting beside Dad as he weakened from heart failure. He gripped my hand, his rough skin now frail, rasping through an oxygen mask. James, don't let war win. Do something better than I did. I cried, holding his hand, feeling each breath slip away until the heart monitor flatlined with a long, piercing beep. I stayed in the hospital all night, hearing nurses wheel carts down the hall, patients groaning in nearby rooms, learning to feel the pain of others. Not just Dad's, but every soul suffering there. He said, I placed you near suffering, not to break you, but to teach you compassion, a cornerstone of your mission. The vision changed. I was 40, at Common Grounds Cafe in Lexington, 2013, sitting across from Rachel. She vented about work stress, bosses demanding faster data, family pulling her back to California. Her eyes red as she said, no one understands me. I didn't advise, didn't interrupt, just listened, my hands wrapped around a cold coffee mug, letting her pour it all out. When she stopped, she grabbed my hand. Thanks, James, you make it lighter. I smiled, thinking it was just friendship, but he said, you hear people's hearts, not just hers, but all who hurt. It's my gift to you, to guide them. I saw myself at 45, in my Lexington apartment, 2018, after Mom's death from a stroke. The roof leaked during a winter storm, water dripping onto the kitchen floor. I climbed up alone to fix it, hammer and nails in hand, soaked through, crying from loneliness but finishing as the wind cut through my skin. I sat on the sofa afterward, hands scratched, thinking it was just stubbornness. But he said, you're strong in adversity, not pride, but my strength lifting you, a sign you're chosen. Finally, I saw today, collapsing on the lab floor, chest searing, my heart stopping amid Rachel's screams. I saw the golden light pull me from darkness, gentle, yet unstoppable. He said, this is the final moment I called you, through death, so you'd live for my mission, peace over war, light over hell. The golden light blazed brighter, and he continued, James, humanity is racing toward a new hell. World War III isn't a theory. It's a choice they're making with every missile, every border dispute, every greedy grasp for power. But you'll bring light. Tell them hell is their creation, peace is my will. Through Psalm 23, you are with me. These signs aren't just in you, they're in others chosen too. You'll recognize them, lead them to me. I trembled, asked, how can I do it, Lord? I'm a scientist, not a preacher. I'm afraid I'm weak. He replied, you're not weak. You're strong because I'm in you. Go back. Live, and speak. The white space dissolved, the golden light faded into streaks, and I was pulled back, gentle as falling snow, yet forceful as a nuclear current. I jolted awake in the emergency room at Mount Auburn Hospital, my chest aching as if I'd been punched, my breathing shallow, the sharp smell of antiseptic stinging my nose and making me cough. The heart monitor beeped steadily, pulse 85. An IV line chilled my left arm, the white ceiling lights glaring down, forcing me to squint. David, the paramedic, sat beside me on a plastic chair, holding a clipboard, and said, you're awake. Thank goodness you had a stroke. Your heart stopped for 3 minutes and 47 seconds. We shocked you 3 times. I whispered, my voice hoarse as sandpaper. God pulled me back. David looked at me, nodded slightly, didn't argue, just jotted something on his chart and stood to call a nurse. Maria stepped in, checked the IV drip and said, blood pressure's stabilizing, but you were critical. Your coronary artery was 90% blocked, a huge clot. You're lucky we got you here fast. I nodded, my head still spinning, and asked, how long was I out? David replied, about 30 minutes from when you collapsed to now. You've been in this ICU for 15. I closed my eyes, the golden light flashing in my mind, the horrific war scenes, his voice echoing in my chest. You're chosen. I opened my eyes, stared at the white ceiling, feeling my breath fragile yet strong, like a miracle I couldn't explain with physics. They kept me in the hospital for 10 days, moving me from the ER to the cardiology ward, room 512. A small, single room with pale green curtains and a window overlooking Mount Auburn Street, where cars slid by under melting snow. My lead doctor, Dr. Robert Nguyen, a 55-year-old Vietnamese-American with salt and pepper hair and a steady voice, ran EKGs, a chest CT, then performed a minor procedure on day 3 to place a stent in my right coronary artery. He explained, holding a medical chart. You had a stroke from a clot in your coronary artery. Your heart stopped for nearly 4 minutes. Your brain went without oxygen, but you're recovering fast, surprisingly. No neurological damage, lungs clear, just rest now. I lay in bed, an IV pumping blood thinners into my arm, sipping cold water from a plastic cup a nurse handed me, my chest still sore when I coughed, but no longer stabbing like a knife. Rachel visited on day 4, bringing a tin of homemade oatmeal, cookies, sitting beside my bed on a plastic chair, her eyes red. I thought I'd lost you, James. You collapsed and I couldn't do anything. I just screamed for help. I took her hand, smiled weakly. I'm fine now, thanks to you. I've got something to tell you. Over those 10 days I observed, saw nurses trudging down the hall with med carts, eyes shadowed from overnight shifts, whispering about low pay. Heard the patient next door, an 80-year-old woman, moaning from heart pain but still asking her daughter over the phone, why hasn't this month's insurance check come? Watched families in the waiting room, anxious yet snapping. At Slow Doctors, why isn't anyone helping my mom? I listened to the radio in my room, news of Russia testing a new missile, the US bolstering troops in Poland, China drilling near Taiwan, and remembered his words, humanity is racing toward a new hell. I saw it in every glance, every word, greed, envy, fear, the bricks of hell right before me. But I also recalled the mission he gave me, to bring light, to bring peace through Psalm 23. On the 10th day, March 22nd, I was discharged. Dr. Nguyen checked me one last time, my heartbeat steady, blood pressure 125/80, no more chest pain. Handed me prescriptions for aspirin, statins, and beta blockers for 3 months, saying, rest, avoid stress, come back in 6 weeks. Rachel picked me up, driving me home in her Honda CR-V, and I stepped into my apartment, opened the living room window. The smell of melting snow and crisp air flooding in, refreshing, sank onto my old sofa, gazed at the maples, outside, knowing I wasn't the same James Carter anymore. I changed after that, not loudly, but deeply. I requested a 3-month leave from Lincoln Laboratory, called my boss, Dr. Helen Brooks, a 60-year-old woman with a sharp voice, and said, I need time to recover, physically and mentally. She grumbled, James, the project won't wait, but fine, send the doctor's note and I'll approve it. I emailed her Dr. Nguyen's confirmation, then began living for the mission he'd given me. That first day back, I pulled Mom's Bible from my bedside drawer, brown leather, edges frayed, the faint smell of old paper rising as I opened it. I read Psalm 23, each word sinking into me like it was new. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. I knelt by the sofa, prayed for the first time in over 30 years, my voice clumsy. Lord, if I'm chosen, guide me. Help me bring peace amid war. I felt him, not the golden light, but a quiet peace in my chest, like Mom's hand on mine as a boy. I told Rachel a few days later, when she visited with a pot of Earl Grey tea. We sat in my kitchen, morning light streaming through the window, onto the oak table, and I said, Rachel, I nearly died, but God saved me. He showed me hell and wars from World War I to a vision of World War III and told me to bring peace. She frowned. You, a physicist, believe this? Wasn't it a hallucination from oxygen loss? I smiled. I thought so too, but it was too real. And the signs in my life, like that reactor dream I told you about, or hearing my name as a kid, all fit his words. She tilted her head. You told me about standing in a reactor unafraid. I remember. You think that was God? I nodded. Yes, and you've got signs too. You said you don't fit with those power-hungry scientists, And you listened when I was down. She went quiet, then said, "You're making me want to believe in peace, not war." I joined a prayer group at First Baptist in Lexington, not the Roxbury Church, but a small white building nearby, attending my first service in 3 decades on Sunday, March 30th. The church was modest, smelling of wood and incense, and I sat, mid-row, hearing Pastor Laura read Psalm 23, feeling he spoke straight to me. After, I shared my story with a few: Paul, a 65-year-old white-haired vet, and Lisa, a 40-year-old teacher. Paul said, "I heard my name in the wind. Back in Iraq, I thought it was a trick." Lisa nodded. "I dreamed of light when my husband died. I couldn't explain it." I realized they had signs too. They were chosen, and I saw their eyes light up as I spoke of hope. I started a podcast, Science, Faith, and Peace, recording in my living room with an old Best Buy mic, sharing my near-death experience, the hell humans create and the peace God wants. The first episode, Hell is Our Choice, aired April 5th, 2025, and I said, "We don't need World War III. Choose peace, as Psalm 23 teaches." I ended, "Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video to spread the message of peace. Together, we can stop hell." It took off, 500 listens the first week, 2,000 the next, from Boston to California, even the UK and Australia. Listeners commented, "I've seen signs too. I want peace." Or, "Thank you, James, I'll pray." I shared wider with my neighbor Henry in apartment 3B, a 70-year-old ex-banker who said, "I didn't break when my wife died. I heard someone call my name that night." With Tom, the lab tech, who admitted, "I dreamed of light when I quit drinking. I thought, I was crazy. I saw signs in them. They were chosen too." And I spoke of Psalm 23, of hope amid war's shadow, watching their faces brighten, like rediscovering lost faith. I live differently now. Each morning I brew coffee, sit by the window, read the Bible, jotting notes with a ballpoint pen like Mom did, my hands steady. I walk Lexington, watch the maples, listen to NPR without fear of the news. I know my mission. I wrote the Department of Energy, proposing my research for clean energy, not weapons, adding, "Choose peace, not hell." Sometimes in the wind through the trees, I hear him, "James, you're doing well." And I believe, for the first time truly believe, I'm chosen to bring light amid humanity's darkness.